welcome to Insight, a show where we have courageous conversations about social justice and the issues affecting the citizens of the region of Peel and beyond. I'm one of your hosts, David Barnwell, and I'd like to tell you something very exciting about tonight's episode of Insight. We're actually broadcasting live from the Grand Cayman Islands, and very shortly, a phone number will appear at the bottom of your screen. Now, if you call it and provide us with your credit card information, your full name and home address, we will be able to enter you into a sweepstakes to win $1 million. It only costs you $100 to enter. Sounds pretty exciting, sounds pretty believable, but it's how the story always starts. Sometimes the penalties are very minor and it costs nothing more than a trip to the bank to replace your credit card. But other times it's far more detrimental to your life, where you find yourself fighting to maintain ownership of your house. I'm talking about fraud. And you may not hear people talk about it too much, or even hear stories of people who have experienced it, because studies show that only 1 in 10 people report when they are a victim. I'm joined by 3 Insight hosts, Ranjit, Dave, and Hardeep, as well as 2 very special guests to share their authentic story, Satmik and Medea. Over to you, Ranjit.
Thank you very much for joining us today, and I know that both of you have shared with us some of your experiences. So what I would love, Medea, if you can start by sharing your experience of being a victim of fraud.
Sure, thank you for having us. Well, my story is I was a victim of a rental scam. This happened several years ago. I was looking for a place to move into, and I found an ad online. I contacted the agent, or the alleged agent in this case, went to go see the place. It was a beautiful luxury condo. I really liked it. Took a few days to think about it, went back to see it again. I signed the lease, and there was a paper trail, of course. I gave him a security deposit. And I mean, the agent was a very professional person. He was dressed professionally. He knew the neighbors. He knew the security guard. He had access to all the amenities in the building. So, I mean, I thought I took all the right precautions, but obviously not. Turns out I was supposed to move in the following month, and he literally disappeared. He wouldn't reply to my text messages or phone calls or emails. And it turns out that he was actually the tenant and not the agent. So he was renting the place for a short period of time, had access to the condo and all of its amenities, and did this to 9 other individuals. So quick cash, $14.50 per person, times 9, and he just fled the province.
Wow.
Yeah.
And you're actually somewhat of an expert, you know, in terms of dealing with fraud. Right?
I do have I have a background in fraud prevention. I'm actually an investigator right now, and it can happen to anybody. That's my message. I mean, no matter how many precautions you take, you can fall victim.
They say hindsight's always 20/20. When you look back now, were there warning signs that you might have missed that other people can be educated on to sort of look for, so they don't fall victim to the same type of scam?
In this case, my advice would be to always. If the ad is too good to be true, just be wary. In this case, the market price was slightly lower than the other condos advertised in the area. So that was I guess the hook that people kind of.
So I wonder how you can verify that the person actually showing you the condo or the apartment actually owns it. So is that something we should be asking for? Is if we're going looking for a condo or an apartment, is to say, could you show us evidence that this is in fact yours?
Well, what I did in this case was I contacted the condo board,
right,
and I asked them to contact me with the owner, because at this stage, like, I had nowhere to go. I had already given my notice to my previous landlord. I booked movers. I had packed all my belongings, and I was literally out of a place to stay. So I was scrambling to find out how to deal with this. So I contacted the board, and they put me in touch with the actual owner, who was also just baffled at this. He was like, "Oh, I thought this was my tenant. I don't have an agent." And So I guess that would be the first step. If it's a condominium, then perhaps contact the board or
find out who the owner is and make sure that see, and again, as you were saying, I think hindsight, it's always 20/20, but I think in planning for the future, you don't always think, okay, I've got to make sure that I put this in place and that in place, but that's something that we need to do more and more.
Yeah, and I think that in the example that you're given, it's really hard for you as well, because the person wasn't coming out and saying that I'm the tenant or I'm the owner of this unit. He was acting as an agent for the owner.
As the agent, the
listing
agent.
So
I think in this specific case, that shows the importance of having your own agent to represent you when you're looking for a property, as opposed to just trusting a listing agent or a name that's thrown up on a website.
For sure. In retrospect, I probably should have done that, gone through a real estate agent, because it doesn't cost you to have an agent show you properties if you're renting, whereas,
So the message is that all of us can be victims of fraud.
Even an investigator.
Exactly, and you'd imagine that you would be more cognizant of what to look for.
For sure.
But I think we put our guards down, right, on a day-to-day basis when we're doing things that we think are just regular.
Exactly.
And so Satmik, share your story with us.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me, obviously. So my story is kind of something that's really, it's out there right now. A lot of people fall victim to this. So with my case, I had a really trusted friend, and that I was been communicating a lot via email as well, and we have a lot of discussions over there. And they were out of the country. I knew they were leaving. They told me prior that they were going to be out of the country and they're going to be traveling in Europe and whatnot. So I knew they were going to be out, and I didn't quite really expect what was going to take place probably about 10 days or 12 days after. A couple of weeks later, I got an email from them. I thought it was them, and they sent me, look, I got family members that are really ill right now, and my niece is going to go, like a heart transplant, and they got to, we're just trying to gather some money to get some surgery taken care of and just medical costs altogether. So got the email, and for the, 24 hours goes by, and I'm kind of like really weary about it. I'm like, you know what, this person's extremely trustworthy. I got nothing to really worry about in terms of the money. The finances wasn't the issue for me. It was, is this really going on? And they probably would have reached out to me other than just say email. So these are questions that was going through my mind, and to be very honest, with fraud in general, you never really think you'll be a victim of it, but you're always thinking in the best interest. So I think on the flip side, as the person who committed the fraud, they're trying to play with that emotion. They're going to take advantage of that emotion that you're feeling at that point, say, you know what, someone's down, it's a family member, it's a loved one, and because they must have known and read the emails we've been having in the past that, I'm leaving Toronto, I'll be back on such, and we'll reconnect when I get back. They already knew and established that, reading the previous emails after hacking in the account, that they knew that the person was out of the town and maybe they didn't want to have long distance calls or whatnot, however it worked. And as blind as I was, it's like we needed within the next 48 hours was what, after we went back and forth with emails, so we can get the down payment in for the surgery. And I went into the Western Union, said only way we can take it is Western Union because it's the fastest way for it to come. And I go into the Western Union, give all my information, and I sent the money over. Little do I know, when when my friend comes back, I emailed them, about a couple of months later. Usually you're not the one to initiate that contact. They're obviously with, you're thinking, family, it's what's going on, they're ill. So I didn't really reach out like that and say, hey, the money that I sort of lent you. I didn't know how to really go about it, to be honest. So I was like, everything will be fine. And then a few months go by, and I finally, approach the situation, and they're like, what are you talking about? Like, this didn't happen. And literally right away, a friend's like, look, you know what? We gotta look into this, because you know me, this wouldn't happen like that. I'm like, absolutely, this is not how it would go down. And we go right away, and pretty much the money's lost. We go to the police. We can't really figure out how this happened. I guess there must have been a hacking in the email accounts, and this is, I'm sure it's very common. I get spam email all the time, and in this case, it was attached to somebody that was really trustworthy for me, right? I would go out of my way for, there's certain people that you have, that that if something ever happened, you'd be there. I mean, you'd obviously think, twice about the scenario as well, based on, your own finances or whatever it may be, but you get put in these situations, and it kind of tests you as a person as well. Like, if something, an emergency happens, like, you kind of think of the worst. And got that, went in, and till today, we haven't really been able to recover the costs or the money, but it's a learning lesson altogether, right? You think about it and say, if it is really an emergency, I'd really think of the message of what I could really say and tell people to be really wary about what you read on your email. The closest individuals to you probably reach out to you, probably by phone. They would call you or let you know this is a scenario. But email, they would play with your emotions. They would know what's going on based on prior conversations. So never send money through the Western Union. That's number one. If it's someone, you got to know, don't do it if you have no idea what's going on. I'm not saying Western Union's a bad, agency or anything or institution. They're probably going about their own business. So when I told Western Union, they were trying to track it as well. They're like, this is very common, so we're gonna track this account and make sure where it's going. But they take advantage of the family, the sour moment in the family, and then that's what you got to be careful about that. So.
Really, the internet has really opened us up to so much more in terms of fraud. I mean, there's the example that you've been given.
Yeah.
There's also, you get these. I mean, I get these emails all the time saying that there's somebody in Africa.
Yeah.
No, there's somebody in Africa who's left, $1 million to me in their will, and
That's right.
they're just looking for my financial information. And I'm wary enough and educated enough to know that this is a scam, but. The others may not have that same luxury. They may say, "Oh, you know what? Yeah, it sounds great. I can use some money, and we can, I have a family member in Africa that just passed away."
It's so important to always report it, though. I find, like in my case, personally, there was light at the end of the tunnel, in the sense that I did report it to police, and it wasn't until 2 years later that I was contacted, and I was told, they caught the individual. He had done the scam in British Columbia, in Saskatchewan, and in Alberta. And he was it was told of 60 people that he had scammed of $80,000 in total. So he became a pro at it, and so but they caught him. They caught him, and that was the light at the end of the tunnel for me.
And now, of course, there's identity theft, which is really huge. And so going back to your case, Satmik, did you double check with this person to see if they really did need the money? Were you able to do that in any way, or were you sort of, your heartstrings were being pulled and you felt, I don't want to bother him or her right now, and let them get on with dealing with the disaster that they're dealing with,
yeah, absolutely.
or the tragedy.
And that's the biggest thing about it, right? You think to yourself, you attach the trust between, obviously, the relationship you have with them. So in my mind, I was like, there's no doubt in my mind. There's no way that this individual is going to send me an email if it's not serious, especially in that case. But in terms of really double checking, that's not something that crossed my mind right away. It was kind of like, let me just cross check again. So the original amount they asked, to be honest, was a lot higher than what I actually sent. They're like, in the email, it's like, just send me over whatever you can. This is what we need, so send me over what you can. So I kind of was reading it, and I was like, send you over what you can, but this is what we need. So are you really asking to send me this much, or whatever I can? So I was like, well, at this point, this is all I can really send you based on whatever my situation was, because I didn't really know as well. So it was sort of like a trial and error, I guess. But that's not what I was thinking. I'm like, if they really need it, this is what it is. So send a significant amount over, and I didn't really double check. And that's another thing, I guess. Maybe a word of advice for anybody who's in that situation is, I don't even want anyone to reply to those emails because email on its own sometimes it's not the most, I guess, transparent, where you can see right through. If you're talking to someone, you can hear them, you can kind of attach that. So I don't want to be saying that email is the wrong way, but these emails are very common. So you have to be very careful about it. And I think the email, when investigators went in and looked at it, it was a spoofed email, which was sent out originally, which was responding to the same email, acting as my friend's email. So it always showed up on my email when I received it as my friend's email, but it was another email receiving the email. So they were playing around with it. You got to be very careful with the way they word things. You'll know based on the remarks and stuff. Now looking back, that's a great point. In hindsight, it's always 20/20, right? You're like, how did I not see this? But when you attach that moment with what's going on, family member, surgery, you think about all this, a trusted person, they're asking for money. All right, it's not the money that you're worried about. You hope everything's good on their end, and that's what you're really looking at. So they play on that emotion, and that's the message. Sometimes don't let your emotion always be there. Kind of maybe dig a little bit deeper, because I'm not saying one day isn't the difference, because it could be, but you kind of play the situation out as best as you can, and maybe try to reach out to them if they can't reach you, and say, hey, look, I got this email. Is this really you? And can you tell me? And they'll be like, yes or no, and you can go from there.
When it comes to situations like that, be a skeptic, I think, right?
Yeah.
And just, you know, pick holes apart, and then finally you'll come upon a decision that you're happy with. And
I guess in that case, everyone has to be an investigator, right?
Yeah.
So,
And
to
it's,
some
it's
degree,
sad,
right?
isn't
So-
it? Because
Right.
even if you are an investigator, you still get caught up in it, I'm
Right.
sure. But for you, when you actually filed the claim, the money had already been cashed in Amsterdam or somewhere, hadn't
Yeah,
it?
it was in the Netherlands, and for them, I looked into some of their law as well. Even when I was talking with the police, and they're like, their law and international fraud that it was, it's a bit more open compared to, say, to Canada. But I did file with the Canadian Anti-Fraud Agency as well, and they gave me some information. That's a great agency to go to where they can at least have an example. And if no one really voices their opinions and what's going on and share these stories, it's just going to continue to happen. And I mean, there's more and more happening with our technologically advanced email systems and the way people are sending out mass emails now. I mean, who knows how many people he or she had scanned before.
Your
But
key message then, please, Satnik.
the key message would be you should never provide, obviously, your secure information such as SIN numbers and credit cards online anyway. In any case, unless you know it's a secure website and whatnot. But be proactive with who you're sharing your information with, especially with emails as they're coming in. I mean, the crime people who are committing crimes are going to play with that. So you have to be a bit more skeptical, as you said, with the emails that you are receiving or phone calls that you may receive to receive your money. So double check, triple check.
Key message.
The key message would be as well to just be skeptical and always stay a step ahead. So in my situation, just if it's too good to be true, it most likely is, and just to double check, triple check, and just don't send your money out, or don't leave a paper trail if you can. So with Western Union, there's no paper trail. In my case, I gave them cash, so there was no paper trail.
So you need to ask for a receipt. You need
Ask
to
for a
double
receipt.
check with the person, and that's really, really important.
Or write a check, and that way it can be traced.
Well, Western Union, they give you a receipt, but in this case, it's not really a black or white. It's such a gray area where they can't really trace where it is. But yeah, having paper copies always helps absolutely in an investigation if it does escalate, right? So
Thank you
Yeah.
very much for joining us today. We'll be right back straight after we go to Play Matters. Come join us again. We'll be right here.
Close your eyes. Now, imagine your child is playing outside with her friends. An unknown individual approaches your child and her friends and offers to bring them home for freshly baked cookies. Now, some of the children ask questions about the location of the home, while others immediately decide to go. Which decision would your child make? Open your eyes. Now, as demonstrated through this scenario, adults and children are taken advantage of every day, and it is important to ask questions to avoid putting yourself in danger. We will quickly demonstrate the rules of the game Guess Who, as it's important for your children to develop the skills of asking questions when meeting a new individual. The questions you ask in the game are basic, so it's important for parents to continue to build on the types of questions you would tell your child to ask themselves when coming into contact with a new individual.
So, the game of Guess Who, the main goal is to basically guess what your partner has chosen of all the range of people here. So as you can see on the board, basically, for example, Rachel told someone named Rachel, like her name, and basically she has all these people lined up on the board. Now, the thing is, I don't know what her person is, but she does, and she keeps it in her mind. And what we're going to ask basic questions to kind of get the ball rolling. And basically, again, like Rachel said, they are very basic questions. That's how you build up on the foundation. So to show an example, we're actually going to play a game.
Okay.
Yeah?
So I'm going to choose a new person.
Sorry.
Since you decided.
Oh, I have to explain it first? Okay, let's see.
All right.
Okay.
Okay.
You go
Are you going to go first?
Yeah, sure. Okay. Rachel, is your character male?
Yes.
Yes? Okay, so now, since her character is male, I'm going to knock down all the females just by pushing up the thing like this. So then I have a little bit less to guess from. And I think, oh, yeah, that's pretty much it. Okay, you go.
All right, Christina, does your person have blonde hair?
No, they do not have blonde hair. So now Rachel's knocking on all the people who have blonde hair. Again, process of elimination, basically idea of saying one thing and then kind of doing the other. All right. Does your person have facial hair like a mustache?
Yeah, they do have facial hair.
Oh, okay, they do have facial hair. Okay. So now whoever doesn't have facial hair, I knock off. Oh. All right.
Now, Christina, does your person have or wearing glasses?
Yes, my person wears glasses.
Oh, looks like I'm going to win this game.
Okay, hold on. Let's not get risky here. Okay. Does yours have a mustache?
No.
No? Okay. 1, 2, 3. Oh, I think I know. Okay, go.
Christina, is your person have white hair?
No. Do you know who my person is?
I think so.
Okay.
Is your person Sarah?
Yes, it is. Okay, so turning around here, and here it is. So, teaching your children to ask questions and build trust is critical in helping them develop. The skills needed to avoid being taken advantage of. Like Rachel mentioned before, the questions in Guess Who are basic and will have a small impact on the overall picture. Potentially, after the game is done, maybe parents, you would like to take the time to talk about more complex questions, which can include safety questions to help your child analyze the importance of a situation when it comes to interacting with new individuals. Thank you for joining us.
Welcome back to Insight, a courageous conversation on fraud. And what we're trying to do is build understanding. So right now we have Jennifer from the Peel Police with us and Sanish, who's a lawyer. If you could share with us, Jennifer, a little bit about what sort of frauds do you deal with? Like, what do they look like?
Sure.
How many, in terms of the types of frauds that you deal with most?
Okay. I can say that a number of the frauds that we're seeing in the region of Peel, although I know they are affecting all Canadians, are advance fee type scams, particularly loan scams or job opportunity scams, on the premise that when you are applying for a job online, that you are sent some form of a check for fees or for payment, but you're to advance money further on to somebody, and that check ends up bouncing, or that check ends up being fraudulent, and you're left being held responsible for that amount that you forwarded on. So the idea of advancing fees, or the loan scam, where magically you're approved for instantly $5,000, which we all know that you don't have always that instant approval, but they're asking you to advance some type of fee, whether it's insurance or some type of interest coverage fee, and you're advancing these fees in getting that $5,000, but you never get your actual loan. So there's the job opportunity scam, the loan scam. We're seeing people still being affected by the romance scam. They're meeting people online, and they're developing some sort of online relationship, and then they're being asked to send money because they're in some type of peril, whether they're employed outside the country or what have you, and again, asking for money, and then that person never really exists. We're still continuing to see the CRA, Canada Revenue, or immigration scam, phone scam, where people are being contacted and under the guise of that there is some form of a warrant or some money is owing to the government, and they're requesting money to be sent. And people, obviously not wanting to be in trouble, forward on money. So that's another form of a scam that we're seeing. There's still the lottery scam, where you have the chance to win $1 million, but they're asking again for small fees, whether it's insurance again, or lawyers' fees, or exchange fees, and then the money's being forwarded on. So those are some of the main key frauds that we're sort of seeing in the region.
So when people report the frauds, do they actually come into the station, into the police station to report them, or are they on the phone? Like, what sort of services are available to people that have been victims of fraud?
Sure. With respects to reports, as Peel Regional Police, we don't take any reports over the phone, just basically because we want to know who it is we're speaking with. Right. And so we take reports at a police division or a community station, and so anybody can go in and just explain that they're there to report a fraud incident, and they would be completing a form, and then the form is submitted, they're provided a police report number, and then the information is forwarded to the fraud office.
And then the fraud office would take a while. How long roughly? I guess it depends on
It
what
entirely
the incident
depends
is.
on the nature of the scam,
Right.
the extent of the documents in relation to the scam. So really, truly, there's no real timeline that we can sort of indicate in terms of.
And I guess my interest would be that if somebody has been in and they've actually filled the form out and left it there, they would like to have some sort of sense of how long it's going to be before you contact them and say, you know what, this is what, or would they explain that process when they submit the form to say, look, we'll be in touch with you a month from now, 2 months from now, 6 months from now, or we'll be phoning you and letting you know what the process is. Like, I just want to know what people should expect if they've gone in and filled out a form and actually submitted it.
Right, so if they've submitted it at a community station or police station, they would be provided a copy of the police report that they had completed, as well as an occurrence number or report number.
Right.
In terms of, again, you know, indicating when someone can call you back, it's truly hard to tell, because you know, sometimes we wouldn't be contacting anyone until we had further information to provide.
Right.
And depending on the nature of their report, if they haven't suffered any sort of financial loss, or that it's truly just for information purposes only, the report is there, but there wouldn't be anybody contacting you because it would be considered sort of at no further follow-up at that point. But entirely on a case-by-case basis, it's really dependent on what the nature of the scam is, what further information that we require as fraud investigators to continue the investigation. So someone may contact you, you know, a few months in terms of determining, okay, this is where we're at. But you know, obviously, as a community member, you know, if you have any questions concerning the report that you've made, you know, we encourage you to contact the office, and we can anyone that can advise you on the status of the report.
In the previous segment, we had 2 people on here who was sharing their experiences about the frauds that were committed against them, and they were both talking about hindsight and things that they would have done differently. What can we say to our viewers that, you know, things on what should we record, what type of information should we ask when we're skeptical about you know, what we may be getting ourselves into, and what can help you with your investigation along down the line? I
think for anybody, we all know that, you know, we don't get money for free. I think that's the biggest point, is that you're not going to win $1 million. No one's giving away $1 million. And then the same as a loan. Like, I understand people are needing jobs and are needing money, but money isn't given away for free, and no one just sends you a check for $2,400 that they've never met you before. Right. So these are all key things, is, you know, is this really, and in the other segment, is this too good to be true, truly? Yeah. And I think when you are communicating with anybody, you know, I think it's important to realize that under the internet, it affords anonymity. And so previous segment talked about email address being spoofed, and phone numbers can be spoofed, where the caller ID looks as if it's from a phone number and it's not. So sometimes it's confirming further information. In terms of documents, I think it's keeping accurate banking records, so transfer receipts, Western Union transfer receipts, MoneyGram receipts, banking documents, or any bank transfers or wire transfers that have been made in relation to it. But I think, again, you know, there is some sense that we'd have to get back to traditional business of a handshake and meeting people in person, and knowing that all the major banks offer the same type of funding and loaning, but they're not asking you for $500 in advance. So again, is this too good to be true? Is this price too good? And what's the risk if I send this money and this person goes away? You know, what are my chances of trying to find this person? And if they're sending me items, how do I know they're even legitimate or real? You know, if they're in Calgary and this camera shows up and lo and behold, it's not the camera that you ordered. Again, how do I really recover what I've lost? And those are all things you need to consider.
Now, what is the recovery from the police aspect? If people were to report fraud against them, is there any way of recovering, especially over the internet frauds?
In terms of if someone has suffered a financial loss and a criminal investigation is commenced and there is an arrest made and then through the court process, there is a finding of guilty, the judge can impose restitution, but that is upon a guilty sentence or a guilty plea. So that is a lengthy process. But that, in terms of the criminal process, is where you would see some recovery from lost funds.
So Sanish, you're a personal injury lawyer, and you deal with, I understand, a lot of fraud and a lot of staging accidents. Can you share with us some of the sorts of situations that you've experienced?
Of course. I've come across various claims where I've had people come to my office and tell me we're hurt, we got into a car accident, and we need your help, and we're looking for a lawyer, and these are the injuries I sustained. So when you sit down to examine them, sometimes it's then you can decipher whether this person is actually hurt or actually not, who hit him, what were the circumstances around, where were they, what were they exactly doing, who else was sitting in the car. For example, I once came across a claim where we had 3 people sitting in one car. So they all sat down in the boardroom with me, and I started to ask them questions. I'm like, how do you know this person? How do you know this person? And how do you know this person? And nobody knew anyone. And it was there and then that I said, goodbye, guys. See, I can't represent you. Yeah. And then other kind of fraud that I've come across is with rehab clinics that are regulated by the Financial Services Commission of Ontario, which we address as FSCO. And what they usually, well, not usually do is, it would be incorrect of me to say that, there are some clinics out there. For example, one that was recently in the newspaper last month, where Aviva conducted an investigation where there's the receptionist and there's a paralegal sitting at the clinic telling them to fake their injuries that can't be determined via a diagnosis. For example, getting headaches, or my neck hurts, or I have chronic pain, and then getting them to sign sheets that they've attended these many times, and then the clinic will bill the insurance company. So that's the kind of fraud that I come across.
And I know that I've heard, and again, I think it was a commercial. I watch all the wrong commercials, obviously, but there was something about depression. Just say that you're depressed, because that's something they can't track or trace.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. And then just keep coming back to the psychologist or whoever and keep that trail going. And that's sad.
It is.
When you're actually seeing commercials supporting that sort of fraud. And maybe we should be reporting the commercials.
Yeah, it's really a huge, I don't know what word to use, but industry, right? And
yes.
You know, I can think of an example just this past fall where, you know, down the street, it's about 11 o'clock at night, I'm about to go to bed, and I hear this crash outside. And I look out the window and I see that there's been an accident just on the opposite side of the street. By the time I got outside, there was already a tow truck there. And I don't live on a main street. Right, and you just put 2 and 2 together. As, you know, this is not a place a tow truck is usually. I've never seen one before. I've never seen one again there, right? But it got there before I was able to get outside.
There have been several articles in the newspaper, and I believe there was one in the Toronto Star a few years ago, where lawyers, clinics, body shops, tow truck drivers, you name it, everyone's involved and everyone takes a cut. So fraud is a problem.
Marketplace and Fifth Estate have done documentaries about that.
It is a problem, and as a result of why in Ontario today, compared to the Maritimes province, our insurance rates are double and 45% more than they are in Alberta. And there was a recent article again in the newspaper which said 15% of whatever we pay towards our insurance goes to cover fraud. Now, being a personal injury lawyer, and that too on the plaintiff side, I don't really go with everything they have to say, because in my opinion, insurers are always looking for ways not to pay out. But yes, fraud does exist. It is a problem, and it does need to be tackled.
And it's rampant. And what do we do as citizens to ensure that we're vigilant in making sure that if we see or observe, I know what I've learned today, is that if I see any more of those commercials, I need to be reporting them somewhere. Where would I report them?
I would recommend, if there's a lawyer out there who's saying, I can get this for you, or I'm able to obtain this for you in particular, and just giving something you consider to be not right, I would highly recommend you report them to the Law Society right away. That is what I would recommend.
Your last thought, please.
I think a great resource for anybody in the community in terms of learning about all these different types of frauds, and there are so many, is through the Canadian Anti-Fraud Centre. And they have a website that lists some of the current trends and ways in terms of protect yourself, and information in terms of if you have actually been a victim of some type of fraud and what steps she can take.
And that's what we'll do. We'll post it up on our Facebook page
Great.
and then go from there. Sanish, your last thought, please.
My last thoughts, if you've been in an accident, make sure that the clinic you're attending or the lawyer you've been to has a prestigious reputation and they know they're guiding you the wrong way. If your lawyer or your clinic is asking you to fake injuries, you're on the wrong path, my friend.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So when we're looking for that guidance, I think it's really critical that we get all of the resources that we can. I know that I had a case where I had a lawyer for a police that were doing the criminal charges, a lawyer that's looking after the civil case, and then, you know, I still think I've got to go after the bank, to the ombudsman, and that's just one case. But one thing I have learned is a whole ton about law and what not to do and what I need to do in future. So thank you for joining us. It's been amazing, and we've managed to share that with our community. One of the key things that we've learned today is to make sure that you are really prepared to do your research and make sure that it doesn't happen to you and you don't become a victim of fraud, that you empower people around you to be vigilant as well, and to know that fraud exists in so many different forms, in so many different ways, and that all of us are going to be victims of fraud unless we take action now. Thank you, and we're going to be right back after our artist who's going to perform right now. We'll see you in a while.
Hi there, I'm Sarah Singh from Broadening Horizons. Today we're going to be sharing our Power of One project with you. The Power of One project discusses the impacts of words and how they can have a negative or positive impact on how we're feeling about ourselves or how we interpret others. Words can have the power to misinform us and lead us in ways that maybe we don't even understand ourselves. So what we do with the community is help to draw attention to the power of words through pieces like this one here, where we ask people to share words that have had a negative experience on them, and then we change them into positive words, just like our art demonstration is going to show. So on the stage here I have with me Anshal, Gurbir, and Hallie, who are going to be doing a little bit of each of our aspects of our Power of One project. So if you don't mind, Hallie will do his performance right now for her spoken word.
I'm here to tell you a story when I thought wouldn't fall, but resonate inside you to help you stand tall. This world is expanding as we stand right here, yet prejudice still exists based not only on what we wear, stereotypical views, judgmental cares, racial remarks that bring rain, not air. The only thing I don't see is hope to all of this despair, or anything uplifting to those who will hear. We have to understand better. We need to learn how to cope. We have to realize our neighbors so we can strive for this hope. As we live in this world where violence is a crime, we have to observe and learn not to waste our time. No one can deny that adversity is still out of line, as people aren't accountable and people aren't dignified. We are blurred in our vision and deaf in our ears. We realize what's there but turn away in fear. Look around you, but don't tell me what you see, as this is what is called diversity. You aren't me, and I am not you, but together we can be one of the few that stand aside and change the views of those who are unfair and don't know the whole truth.
Welcome back to Inside, a show on fraud and an understanding and courageous conversation around what we need to do in the Voice to Action. We'll find out exactly what we need to do to make sure we protect ourselves. So we're going over to our two guests right now. So Angie, can you share with us a little bit about the experience of seniors that you deal with? Can you go from there?
Sure. So my role as a social worker is to obviously advocate for vulnerable populations, which includes seniors as well. There's been a major incline on not only elder abuse, but seniors dealing with fraud. So that might be a senior whose loved one, family member, somebody who's caring for them has now accessed their finances and is using those finances for their own benefit, and really putting up barriers so that individual cannot access their own financial bank account or debit cards or credit cards or whatever the case might be.
Mm-hmm. So as a clinical social worker, do you meet a lot of these seniors in the hospital or at home? Like how does that work?
In both aspects.
Okay.
So I work in hospital, but I also do private practice, so I've seen kind of the best of both worlds. So an example would be a patient coming into hospital who needs to go into a nursing home, let's say, for example, but now for some reason they don't have access to their finances. And the case might be that they live at home with their son or daughter or whoever, but for some reason that family member is not allowing them to use their own access. It's for their own health care. So that's obviously a red flag for us, and you have to get the right resources in place to advocate for that person.
So, are those the only frauds that you see with seniors, or are you seeing other frauds that are occurring?
Other frauds that I've encountered would be, seniors are saying that, so-and-so showed up to my door, tried to sell me, let's say, like an alarm system, and they sold it to me. I gave them a deposit, I signed all the contracts, and then they never showed up. Okay. So probably more of a lower scale type of fraud. Yeah. But majority of the ones that I've been seeing lately are the financial. Okay. Yeah, withholding their financial bank accounts or, credit cards or bank accounts.
So that's majority, the perpetrators are the family, the
Majority of the time it is, or it's somebody who's caring for them, so somebody that they may have hired.
Where's the fine line there, though? We spoke off camera about an example where, the parents were living with the kids and they were accessing the finances. Well, one might say that because they're living with the kids that they're, I don't want to go about and say that they have the right to some money, but there are obviously expenses in relation to having the parents there.
For sure.
So, but where do you draw that kind of fine line being in the industry?
So definitely that is always the case, right, where families might justify it by saying, well, I'm buying them their Ensure or whatever the case might be, right, buying supplies and things that they need. However, at the end of the day, it's whatever's in the best interest of the patient or the client, right? If it's in their best interest to be remaining at home and you're going to provide that appropriate care, then that's great. Use their monies, their Canada Pension or Old Age Security for that reason. But if at this point the family's burnt out and they can't manage that person's care and they need to go into a long-term care facility, then you need to release those funds so that they can actually go and have a better quality of life in the nursing home or wherever it might be. Got it. Yeah.
So Sanish, you were mentioning in the other segment about the frauds and the setups and the way it happens. Where does a case of fraud, that is brought to the attention of police remain a criminal case, and where do we take it to a civil case? Like, what's the difference? How do we know where to go with a case?
I would say for a criminal action to be commenced against someone, it really comes down to the circumstances of each case, and every case has its own individual aspects to it. So I wouldn't be exactly able to answer when it becomes civil and when it doesn't. For example, I would be using a very different example than fraud. If you're asking me if somebody can commence a criminal action and a civil action at the same time, yes, it is very much possible. If somebody steals from you, criminal charges would be pressed against them, and at the same time, they can sue them for that as well. So it really depends on each case, and each case has its own facts.
So I had a case where I had co-signed a student loan for a young man that was a student, past student of mine, and the mother was adamant that she was going to pay all of the loan, and she was going to pay the interest on the loan until the young man became a doctor and he was going to take over the loan. And I was struggling, quite frankly, afterwards, because they didn't make the payments, and there was lots of delinquencies, and there were lots of challenges in terms of making those payments. And I got to a point where I had to seek advice. And there was a part of the case that was a criminal case, and that was when the young man had actually produced a fraudulent document and given it to the bank.
I see.
And as soon as he gave it to the bank, then the police could take action, and it became a criminal case.
Yes.
Because now he had defrauded the bank.
So now just using your scenario here as an example,
Right.
as you said, there was a document that was given to you that
Right.
was forged or not correct.
Right.
You took that to the police so the police can start with their investigation
Right.
and accordingly press charges.
Right.
Now at the same time you have another remedy on the civil side, and
Right.
your remedy on the civil side is to commence an action against that boy
Right.
who you loaned money to
Right.
and perhaps his mother.
Right.
Right? Because she perhaps knew what was exactly going on or
Right.
not. So my advice to somebody is if you're ever lending anybody money, make sure there's some sort of collateral involved, perhaps putting it down on their house as a second mortgage, third mortgage. There's maybe some kind of vehicle involved or something. I wouldn't ever lend to anyone, and I wouldn't ever recommend anyone lend to anyone without getting something in return. So getting back to what you were saying, my advice would have then been, okay, let's go after the mom and the son, see what kind of property they own. And at the same time, I would let the police do their job with respect to the criminal aspect of the case. So you can run both of them simultaneously at the same time.
Right.
Yes.
And I think, and that's the important piece, because the fraudulent document was only relevant after a couple of years.
I see.
Because the fraudulent document was only provided after he had finished school and was sitting at home and still depleting the loan. So that became the fraudulent part. So those 2 years before, though, I'm still liable because those 2 years I had co-signed and I knew what I was supposed to be going into. So if there is a remedy for the criminal side, it would only be for $78,000 or whatever it was that was.
That would have been on the civil side. The criminal would be the defrauding aspect of
Right,
it.
right.
You would have to go after the amount that you lent him under the civil aspect of the case. Yes.
So the full that would be entitle the full amount.
Yes. Well, whatever is owed, I would try to claim that under civil, not criminal, because and especially if there's property involved, then you go after them, you commence a claim.
And they didn't have any property.
They didn't have any property, right? And that's what happens with a lot of cases.
And they disappeared. You know, so all of a sudden they changed address, and I didn't know where they were, but I knew that the mother was a teacher, and so I knew that she was still with the board. So there were things that I could do, but that doesn't always happen for other people. They may not know the person. They may not be able to access and find out what the address is. So I've heard of numerous cases where a similar scenario has happened, where unfortunately people have become victims to trust young people, especially in professions.
In a situation like yours, to combat that, I would perhaps maybe recommend to someone to hire an investigator to find where this person is, sue them, serve them. If they don't respond, you note them in default, you get a default judgment against them, and perhaps you can look at remedies like garnishing their wages, right? Especially when they haven't responded because they had ample time to respond. Now, if you do it in small claims, it's a separate story. I'm not sure of the amount that was involved as to whether it would be Rule 76 simple procedure, or if it's simply above 100,000, then it would go to the Superior Court of Justice in Ontario. And yeah.
So there are lots of ways that we have to learn our lessons, I guess, in life, but there are lots of ways that we can prevent situations like mine, and I know I've learned a lot. I've learned about small claims court, I've learned about civil law, I've learned about criminal law, I've learned about the process, what I need to do. What can we do to make sure that people understand that these are the precautions that we take to make sure that we don't fall into that trap?
Well, when it comes to lending money, like I said, don't lend unless there's collateral involved. I wouldn't feel comfortable lending to somebody. Yes, trust is there, but in today's world, being naive isn't the best thing. It will come back and bite you in the butt.
And you know what, your finances as you get older, I mean, people move over to fixed incomes. And, you know, I can say that even when it came time for me to buy my home, you know, my dad was like, you know, I'll give you all the money you need for a down payment, don't ask me to co-sign. Right? It's just, you know, you don't want that liability over your head. And this is, you know, I'm his son. He knows exactly where I'm going to be at all points, but you don't know what's going to happen down the line.
Exactly.
And I think in society,
oh, it's sad though, isn't it? I mean, if you can't trust your own kids and you can't, you know, then what is this? This is
I don't think it was a matter of trust. It wasn't a matter that he thought I was going to defraud him or anything along those lines, but it's more so about you don't know what's going to happen in the future. And, you know, your financial stability is how you're going to live the rest of your life. And for my father, who may have been 60 at the time, for him to take on the chances of, you know, another mortgage, it just wouldn't have been financially stable for you know, or an option for him at that time, right? And I think it's just as, you know, going back to your point, it's also, you know, society, and that's a great word. Wisdom is a great word. I was going to use that we're sometimes too gullible, right? And we believe, and we've known these people for years, and we don't think that they're capable of this type of thing. But
Absolutely.
you know, in dire straits, people are capable of doing a lot.
And as I say, don't do business with your friends and family. Don't. Don't.
And now, how can our seniors protect themselves from being victims of fraud?
Right. So there's a lot of obviously centers out there in the community that are nonprofit or not, you know, that can advocate for you. So first option I would say is definitely go to Peel Regional Police, file your complaint, and then take their lead on whatever suggestions or, you know, recommendations they have. Secondly, obviously there's a lot of professionals out there such as social workers or, you know, other community providers who can help you. Education awareness is like the most important thing, right? And unfortunately there's a lot of people who live in fear and they don't want to talk about it. So that's another barrier. So just making sure that, you know, they're comfortable enough to actually open up about the issue and that there is help at the other end.
And we said seek legal advice.
Exactly.
You know, if you have a gut feeling that something doesn't sound true, or you feel that it's just wrong, then you need to get out there before you sign anything, or don't sign anything anyway. But if you do, at least go away and double check that what you're signing is appropriate.
And how do you, you know, obviously Peel is very diverse. How do you sort of bridge community and language gaps that may be happening?
I mean, obviously, it's essential to provide the educational information in all languages. There's a lot of centers out there, a lot of nonprofits such as India Rainbow, Punjabi Community Health Services, you know, Brampton Multicultural Services that provide languages in other cultures or languages or diversities. So just making sure that you connect with them and providing those options for the people that need them.
And actually, I'm second guessing myself now. With SALCO, with the South Asian Legal Clinic, I don't know if they would be available to give advice on issues like this or whether they only deal with immigration. But at least it's a start point, right? Reach out, whoever you can in the community.
Because a lot of times people will say to us, like, oh, I can't afford the legal fees, you know, I'm not even going to bother. But I'm sure there is some pro bono lawyers.
Even if there isn't pro bono, ask somebody around. Ask somebody, speak to someone.
And I'm sure if lawyers were to see vulnerable people, you know, they're at the very least, would give them some advice and say, yeah, you know what, I'll talk to you. You know.
And another thing to keep in mind is a lot of us have, through our job sites or employers, we have EAP or services through like your insurance provider, right? So you can always get legal services that way as well.
And I think key is if you read over the document yourself as well, have somebody else, you know, read it over as well, and you can go that route too. I mean, it's obviously, you know, not everybody takes every document to the lawyer to get signed, but you know, if I was signing something that's that important, I would want somebody else to review it, even if it wasn't a lawyer.
You know, what's interesting is after being a victim of fraud, one thing I've learned is even when I'm on the computer and there's terms and conditions and I'm buying something online, I read those terms and conditions like I've never ever read before. You know, so I know what goes into terms and conditions and what you have. But that fine print, my goodness, you know, is the importance of having to read it. So don't just click, go, but actually read it.
I find there's a lot of legalese involved in those, and you have to sit down, and I find not the average person can do it, and at times we have no other option but to click yes to it because they know we want their service. They know very well, whether it be Facebook or anything else on Google. So everyone knows,
So what are your key messages that you'd like to leave with our audience regarding fraud?
In cases of fraud, my suggestion is, I understand legal fees can be very expensive at times, and for a lawyer just to review a document, it might cost you $300, $400, but look at the picture in the long run. Are you better off paying the $300 or $400 today, or do you want to pay the $5 grand or $10 grand down the road?
Or $100 grand.
Or $100,000 like in your case.
Yes. Sorry. Go ahead.
Key message would be to seek help and support and go with your gut feeling. If it doesn't feel right, don't go through with it.
So basically, if it's too good to be true, and if it feels wrong, then don't follow your gut, but actually go out and seek legal advice.
Yes, absolutely.
And don't sign anything at all. Absolutely nothing until you've had a second opinion.
Absolutely.
Okay. So any additional points from you guys?
I think it was great to learn about the frauds and what we can do to help remedy the situation. Thank you for that.
Yeah, I think, you know, it sounds like it's common sense, but common sense isn't always common.
Yeah.
So, you know, I think it's exactly what you said. It's you gotta take the extra step, have it reviewed, and you know, just make sure that you're not getting into something that, and also be aware of what's going on around you, because a lot of times it's in the news and there's various scams that are out there. Just, you know, be wary of everything that you do.
So what have we learned today? We've learned that we've got to make sure that we seek legal advice before we sign anything, and make sure that you understand exactly what it is you're signing. So read any documents, read anything that you feel you're putting your name to. Before you stamp it with your signature, make sure you read it. And seek the support and the services, ask the questions before. And if there's any gut feeling at all, then you need to pay attention to it. So thank you for joining us today, and make sure you join us next week.
Thank you very much, Ranjit. We all have to remember that we are all vulnerable to fall victim to fraud. Whether you are a teenager buying something online from someone you've never met, or whether you are the elderly individual taking the phone call from this new charity who wants your donation, but you've never heard of them before. During the break, I checked out the Canadian Anti-Fraud Centre website, as was suggested by one of our guests in the research segment, and they have so much useful information on how to protect yourself and even how the basic concept of fraud works. Protect yourself, and remember, if it's too good to be true, it probably is. On behalf of our hosts here, I'm David Barnwell, and remember, keep having those courageous conversations.